welcome to episode 386 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans' weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and I've been doing this podcast for several years, and every couple years self-indulge a little bit and talk about one of my favorite series, Dragon Quest. But it's been so long that I felt the itch again. I needed to talk about Dragon Quest on the podcast again. So I brought three big fans of the series, and we're going to talk a little bit about our pasts with Dragon Quest and the future of the series. So who is that panel joining me today? It is Wes Iliff.
Hey, everybody.
And Ben Love.
Hi, everyone.
And our special guest joining us from rpgamer.com and the Slime Time podcast, Matt Masem.
Hey there, everyone.
So, Wes, Ben, Matt, we all love Dragon Quest. I want to talk about Dragon Quest. Let's get to it. But first, listeners, maybe you're a Slime Time listener or a fan of a fan of RP Gamers content. But Matt is not a RPG fan regular. But Matt, you and I have been following each other on social media for a couple of years. You were great. You were gracious enough to host me on your podcast once a few years ago.
I was going to say, it's probably right about 2 years ago. I think we did this September a couple years back. You and Alana were great.
Yeah, no, it was super fun to record, and I did want to pay you back eventually, and we've been talking about recording this episode for maybe a little bit less than a year, like early 2023. We started talking about it, and our ideas for the episode changed shape over the months. But now I think we have a few things we're excited to talk about. But before we go on to the capital C content, let's just talk about our backgrounds with Dragon Quest a little bit. I'll go first. Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior, they were not my first RPGs. I was already into Final Fantasy when I started seeking out RPGs for my NES. Because I had an NES during the Super Nintendo days and a Super Nintendo during the PlayStation N64 days. But I did rent the first 4 Dragon Warrior games. I thought they were cool, but weird, and I didn't really come close to finishing any of them. But then when I was emulating every game under the sun in the early 2000s, I discovered Dragon Quest 5 and 6 and finally got to play Dragon Warrior 4 to completion, and then I eventually played Dragon Quest 1 through 3 on the Game Boy Color, and played all of the DS and 3DS remakes of Dragon Quest games as they came out. But really, I started becoming a fan of Dragon Quest with those early emulation days in the 2000s, and then Dragon Quest 8 came out, and the DS remake came out, and that's sort of what made me obsessive. Was around 20 years ago, getting into the series in a big way. But I'd love to hear your stories before we move on. Wes, how did you get into Dragon Quest, and what's your temperature on the series right now?
Well, Dragon Warrior, as it was, back then, is what taught me how to read. My mom was a big fan of the game and would play it, and I'd ask her to beat it over and over again, and I'd see all this text popping up, wouldn't understand fully what was going on, so I started asking questions and figuring things out, and that was actually the motivation to get me reading, was seeing Dragon Warrior up there, and I've been a fan ever since. It's what got me into RPGs, what got me into video games. Dragon Quest IV remains one of my favorite games of all time, and I'm pretty optimistic about the future because, I feel like Dragon Quest rarely misses. At least if we're going outside of spin-off territory. Everything that I've seen coming up, we're seeing a revival of the Monster series. We're seeing a new mainline that might be doing some new stuff. We're seeing remakes, remasters, all these things we'll be talking about. There's not a more exciting time, unless maybe you're counting the revival back when Dragon Quest VIII came out.
Yeah, totally. It really did seem like Dragon Quest was was like barely had a presence at all in the West around the Dragon Warrior 7 PS1 era. But then
Mhm.
but then with Dragon Quest 8 being the first European release of the series, and it being a hugely popular, and just the PS2 and DS being wildly popular machines in general, and having games on both of on those systems helped the series quite a bit. I think I'm not alone that there was there was a large spike in popularity of the series around that time. But Ben, around when did you get into Dragon Quest / Dragon Warrior?
Yeah, so my first Dragon Quest game was actually Dragon Quest Monsters 2 on the Game Boy Color. because Pokemon Yellow was my first game I ever played as a kid. And so then after that, I guess I was just looking for anything Pokemon related or similar at all. And one day my mom came home with a copy of Dragon Quest Monsters 2, and I was like, wow, this isn't Pokemon. This is really weird. What is up with all these like weird looking monsters and stuff? But I like that game a lot, and then I really wouldn't return to Dragon Quest probably until the DS era, where I picked up the remakes of 4, 5, and 6, and played 9, and then that got me to go back and play the rest of the games in the series. And since then, I've been a huge fan. But yeah, the spinoffs is actually what got me into it.
Interesting. And rest assured those rest assured those spin-offs will come up soon. But Matt, same question to you. Around when did you get into Dragon Quest, and how did your fandom develop over the years?
Well, when Nintendo made way too many copies of the original Dragon Warrior and had to resort to sending them out to people getting the Nintendo Power subscriptions back in the late 80s, um, I told my grandmother, I was like, "Hey, you're always asking what I want for Christmas. I would love this Nintendo Power magazine, and I get a free video game with it if you order it." And I remember somebody had brought me like the little slip that you could mail in to order it. So I remember giving it to her and then kind of forgetting about it. Then, like, lo and behold, 4 or 5 months later, go over her house on Christmas, open it up, and she's got like a stack of 4 magazines and Dragon Warrior on there. I was like, "Oh my god, you got it!" And like, you've been holding it all this time. So from that time, I was hooked. I got 2 and 3 and 4 like the day they released in the United States. How I knew what day that was, God knows at that point. I'd be in middle school at that time. I remember one of them, my mom actually let me take the day off of school, and we were at Babbage's in the mall. And I was asking some guy, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I think we just got that today." And I was like, "You better have." So
You're
I
doing
was
it. You did exactly what the Japanese National Police force feared, and took
exactly
took off
took a
school
day.
and disrupted workflow because of Dragon Quest.
I sure did. I sure did. And then, like you said, there was that gap, and I didn't even know that Dragon Quest VII came to the PlayStation One because I was a little bit like you. I got my NES when I think my friend bought something else, and then when he got a Genesis, I got a Super Nintendo. So it was, it was always a couple years behind. And then when I went to college in '92, nope, sorry, '96, I didn't even have a PlayStation. It was just I had my Super Nintendo with me for 4 years. So yeah, graduating college and realizing like, oh my gosh, there's another one. There's a PlayStation. I got to get this. I got to keep going. And then yeah, the revival in with Dragon Quest 8 and everything we've had since then. I was on Square Enix marketing site. They had something called Slime Nights back when Dragon Quest 8 came out, and I want to say it was Joker or the first Joker or Rocket Slime. They switched the website to that to promote it for a long time. And then yeah, I've been on the Dragon Quest forums for I want to say about 20 years now. That was my first social media experience, asking people there. I remember my very first post, like online, was, "What do I play after Dragon Quest 6? I've loved these. Now what?" And that just opened the floodgate to RPGs in general. So
Oh boy,
it was a good gateway drug.
we could probably do an entire episode just on our formative experiences on video game forums 20 plus years ago.
Yes.
Mine was a Final Fantasy forum called Caves of Narsh that I was on staff for a while. But that place is a bit of a ghost town now. But yeah. Oh my god, that's unlocking very specific memories for me. But anyway, speaking of very specific memories, um, we mentioned the Dragon Quest oeuvre generally, and also multiple remakes. I think Dragon Quest was one of the first games to get sort of regular remakes. Dragon Quest 1 and 2 and 3 had Super Famicom versions. 4 had a PlayStation One remake that was advertised in the booklet of Dragon
Oh,
Warrior 7, but then never came out.
Broke my heart.
yep.
um, but and then we and there's others of course, but we mentioned the 4, 5, and 6 DS remakes. This is a series that is used to coming out on new platforms all the time, and but also it was one of the first games. I mean, probably not earlier than Mario, but to have genre spin-offs. And Ben mentioned Dragon Quest Monsters, I mean, we all know this, but maybe not everyone does. That Dragon Quest was the originator of the Mystery Dungeon series, which is, has its lineage with Chocobo Mystery Dungeon, and then some other dungeon crawling games that came later, like Shiran the Wanderer. The first one of those was a Dragon Quest IV spin-off starring Taloon slash Tornico, which and I haven't really played any Mystery Dungeon, even though I did mess around with the Vita Shiran the Wanderer a little bit. But yeah, Dragon Quest is so popular in Japan that it's one of those series that just has more games and more influence and more reach than you think it does. And it was super niche in the United States, where all four of us live, for many many years. But then it's been getting more and more popular with spikes when like Dragon Quest 8 landed, and then the DS era, and most recently with Dragon Quest 11, which not everyone loves, but I would say is generally very very well received, and is again probably my favorite video game of the entire 2010s. Full stop. So, but all these spin-offs and remakes. Um, I mentioned Monsters and Mystery Dungeon, but starting with you, Wes, what's one Dragon Quest game that's not immediately in the main series that you love and think we should draw some attention to today?
I'm anyone who's like a longtime listener might have caught on to the fact that I'm a big Warriors or Muso fan, whatever you want to call the series. And Dragon Quest got themselves in there with the Dragon Quest Heroes games. And I absolutely adore those games, especially the first one, which doesn't seem to be the conventional favorite. But something about combining the monsters, those well designed monsters that I think are the workhorse of the Dragon Quest series, really the backbone of what makes Dragon Quest stand out, and combine it with tower defense and Warriors gameplay, where you can, show overwhelming force, but also kind of control the flow of battle. Um, it was absolutely a brilliant way to combine all the things I love about Dragon Quest in one place. Um, it's probably not most folks' favorite, but oh, I adore it.
I did mess around a little bit with the first one. I own both of them, but because I have some, I don't know, fatigue with the Muso series, I didn't get really deep into any of them. But I do have to admit, like the King Slimes and the Gigantes in those series are satisfyingly big and dumb looking.
Yes.
Um, and just cutting through a horde of slimes, even though I didn't get even close to mid game or end game, is a pretty satisfying exercise. Do you have a favorite character to play in either of the Heroes games?
Terry is kind of broken in at least in the first game, um, because he can divide and get 3 attacks for every swing of the sword, and it ends up being completely ridiculous. But ultimately, I end up playing as Elena the most because Elena's my favorite Dragon Quest character, and if there's an option, that's where I'm going to go.
And I mean, she's an option. Is she in both of them, or just the second one?
Oh, I'm struggling to remember. I don't think she was in the first one, but she might have been.
Okay. I think the second one brought back everyone from the first one,
It did.
or at least all the cameos. Because I did the research on these when I got them like 8 years ago, but I haven't played them as deeply as I would like to. Ben or Matt, have you played either of the Heroes games?
Oh yeah, I've put 100 hours into each of those, and Wes, I'm going to agree with you. One is the best. Like
Thank
that's the one
you.
I almost platinum that doing the 100 hours on it the first time, and the second one I feel like I'm 100 hours in and I've done fewer than half the missions or something.
Yeah,
They added so much. I thought like class changes was cool, but it was maybe too much. I just just
it
want to
was a
go out
bit
and kill a
weighty.
bunch of things. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Like
have
man,
I have heard that those games are overloaded with content. I think one of the I think like Hyrule Warriors Complete
Oh man.
has so
yes,
many missions that people say to 100% it could take like 300 hours. I don't
yes.
Yeah,
I'm not
absolutely.
like when I hear comments like that, and especially with affirmations like you right now, they just have me wanting to sprint in the other direction. Oh yikes.
I can't blame you. I'm a longtime Warriors fan, and even then, that gets to be too much for me.
Maybe I should like play Persona 5 Strikers in one of the Heroes games, and maybe we could talk about this on air later, Wes. We'll
You know I'll
we'll
be there.
yeah, well we'll hold a meeting after this. Ben, are you a Muso guy?
Yeah, so I like Heroes 2 the most probably just because it added some more like RPG stuff in. You have like a map you can explore and there's like towns to visit. So I kind of like how it made it a little more distinct from like the typical Warriors game where you're kind of just like doing mission after mission. But I think both of them are really good, and it's cool to see all the Quest characters return, and then be able to actually control them directly and like kill a bunch of monsters and stuff. It's super fun.
That's the fun thing about those Muso games is that you'll get attached to a character and then just spend hours and hours and hours slaughtering foes with them. So like I think that it's smart for Omega Force or Koei or whoever's making those nowadays to sort of embrace cameo Muso series. Like is another. I mean, there's the Zelda ones that I mentioned. There's Fire Emblem ones. There's One Piece ones. There was a Fist of the North Star one years ago. Like I think trying to hit as many fan bases as you can, and throw in as many cameos as you can is a smart approach. And I have to admit, even though I haven't put a lot of hard time into Dragon Quest Heroes, I'm very tempted. Like those and Persona 5 Strikers are the two I'm closest to playing. But I think it's enough Muso discussion. At least not until another episode. Again, we'll be in talks about this, Wes. But Matt,
Excellent.
is there a particular Dragon Quest spinoff that you like to bring to show and tell?
Well, Ben stole my first answer. Dragon Quest Monsters 2, both on the original GBC, and then the 3DS remake was just amazing. And then Wes, you stole what my second answer would be, the Heroes games. So I'll go to a very very good third tier. I mean, and these are okay. Um, they're all quite good. But the Slime Mori Mori games, so we got the second one of three over
Oh
here.
yes,
Um,
we've lamented that a little bit on the podcast before. It was a trilogy. We got the second one, and it was super fun. So, what's up, Square Enix? Come on.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, just the gameplay is like original Zelda kind of thing. You're just squirting around at that slime. And gosh, that second one with the tank battles just was awesome. And I mean, the pun games in these are unreal with the Plob Father and just all the other little guys that are going around. There's 100 slimes that live in Slimeria or whatever that town is, and got to rescue 100 little slimes, and each one is just great, and they've all got those um, nicknames. They got the guy that fixed your tank is named Sid, so they know what they're doing there.
So
Um,
you're telling me it's the Zelda of Dragon Quest and the Final Fantasy of Dragon Quest and the
it-
Suikoden of Dragon Quest at the same time.
yes, yes, it's all that wrapped up in one, and
Incredible.
you know the third one. Um, Actually, we talked to the gameplay so compelling. It was funny because the very first interview we did on our Slime Time podcast, I think it was like episode 3, just kind of out of the blue, there a translation for that third Slime Mori game came out, and I contacted the guys like, "You want to interview?" Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we get them on, and hadn't done a lot of pregame, and it was only our third podcast ever, and we start off like, "So, what made you love Dragon Quest?" They're like, "We don't love Dragon Quest." I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "This game's just so awesome, we had to translate it." And I was like, "Okay, well, here we go then." So, I mean,
I don't know a ton about Mori Mori 3, but it basically replaces the tank battles from
with
Rocket
ships.
Slime with pirate ship battles. Yeah. So
Yep.
already, if you're telling me that we can have slime puns and pirate puns in the same
Mhm.
game, then yeah, I mean then that's perfect. Did I ever tell you the greatest pirate joke of all time?
Oh boy.
Oh
No.
no.
Okay,
No.
here it is. Here it is. What be a pirate's favorite letter of the alphabet? You'd
One would
think it's
think R,
You'd
but
think
it's
it'd
the
be
C.
R, but 'tis the C. Yep, that's it. Oh man. I would TGS wasn't long ago, and I saw they had a really snazzy looking remake of the DS and 3DS Ace Attorney games.
Mhm.
Mm.
And I think if like a trilogy re-release of the Slime, or, if they want to keep the English localization, the Rocket Slime trilogy,
Mhm.
I would buy that in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't be wait stalking for a sale like I am with Mega Man Battle Network Collection. That would be a day one. Get that on my Switch immediately.
Mhm. Definitely. Definitely.
because I've only played Rocket Slime which is again the second of the three.
Hmm.
But it was so fun that a GBA and a 3DS one of those I would, no question at all. I would. I'm very interested in playing the others. I would seek out that fan translation, but there are just too many other games sitting on my shelf. I don't need to. Complicate things any further.
So true.
Crack open that door.
But Wes or Ben, have you guys played Rocket Slime? Is it as good as I remember it being?
Yeah, the Rocket Slime is awesome. I've played, stumbled through some of the first one in Japanese, and then played the second one. And yeah, I mean they're great, super funny. It's really funny to see like all the different like versions of slimes, like taking different roles in the town. Like you have like a nun slime in the church, and like stuff like that. It's just super cute. And the tank battles are really interesting because you're like they kind of give you use for like all the like stuff you collect, and then you shoot it at the other tanks as ammo, which is just like really fun.
Yeah, I have two glaring holes in my spin-off history, and this is one of them. So when you were talking about a collection, I am all ears.
Square Enix has done a very good job of making their older games available to modern audiences, and they're remaking new things every year. I mean, all those pixel remasters. Star Ocean Second Story R is coming soon. I don't know how much localization effort or porting effort it would take, but I would love a trilogy collection of the Mori Mori games. But I mean, we haven't heard a single whisper of a possibility of that happening. But again, I think all four of us would welcome it.
Hmm.
But Wes and Matt, you had your turns. I'll go on to a Dragon Quest spinoff here, although I'm not sure it's one I necessarily recommend. Um, uh, the Dragon Quest games have had multiple phone games or mobile gacha games
Mm.
over the past several years, and I know that let's see, Dragon Quest of the Stars was one for a while. Then there's Dragon Quest Walk was one. There's a relatively recent one that's based on the Dai's Adventure manga, or Dino Daiboken, or whatever you want to call that. But the one that I played intensely for 18 months, it was Dragon Quest Tact, which is sort of like a monsters game, and sort of like a grid-based tactics game, not unlike a Final Fantasy Tactics or Fire Emblem, where you collect monsters, level them up, uh, like compete for coins. There was monthly events. I ended up being ranked around like 280th on the global server at one point. I do not want to share exactly how much time and money I invested into that ranking. Um, but because the Dragon Quest monsters are so colorful, and the game is surprisingly functional for being a mobile gacha, uh, I was really playing that game made me understand why I should never actually try gambling, because it activated a part of an obsessive part of my brain that was fun but also painful. So I'm not saying you should play the Dragon Quest gacha games, and I definitely don't think you should spend real money on Dragon Quest gacha games. But there are several of them, and Dragon Quest Tact was good enough to have me hooked for over a year. And oh boy, I'm trying to think. One of the last good pulls that I had was I did get Human Form Pissarro,
Mm.
and I got him up to 2 stars, because I got multiple pulls of him in that banner. And I remember he was one of my favorite characters to use. And during the event where they had the Dragon Quest V brides all available, if you completed the single player portion of the event in 1 month, you got to choose one, and get and recruit her,
Everyone's listening very
and
carefully
and
right
recruit
now.
and recruit her for free. But I had my choice very, very easy, because over the course of doing that, I used some banners and my allowance of gacha coins. I got Bianca and Deborah automatically. So when I completed the single player portion, I just picked up Nara, so I would have all three.
Okay.
Yeah,
You
but what
escaped judgment by
what
Yeah.
grace
although
of the gotcha.
although when I've played Dragon Quest V, I think 3 or 4 times, and if memory serves, I think I've picked Bianca 3 times and Deborah once. So that illustrates my preferences on that front.
I think that's exactly my ratio there.
Yeah.
Nara's never been a choice.
It's too
Deborah's the
bad,
best one. We
maybe
love Deborah.
yeah. I think that
Exactly.
I think that when they made Deborah, they like deliberately just wanted someone who was very different from Bianca or Nara slash Flora, and they succeeded in that. But I mean, like Bianca is so wholesome and wonderful. It's like it's like I'm picking Deborah once for the novelty, and that's it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Although I do almost feel bad for Nara. Maybe I should replay Dragon Quest V. It has been a couple of years.
I'll tell you,
She's
Nara
got her own
definitely has
guy
her
waiting there.
fans. Yeah,
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 Nara
that's true.
they do.
Nara does have better spells than Bianca or the daughter, but I think
Hmm.
she's like stuck at level 10 until the last part of the game. So she'll always be at a really low level. But yeah, in general, what is it like? Deborah has better physical attacks. Nara has the best spells, and Bianca is in between, but has higher HP and MP than either of them.
Hmm.
If memory serves.
That's what I remember too.
But
Yeah.
whatever, they all have oomph, and just casting oomph on your husband and son is your job, Bianca. Sorry. Oomph is an uncommon spell in Dragon Quest V. I think your wife is the only person that learns it normally. Maybe there's a monster that does too.
And it's a standard in Dragon Quest. If you learn oomph, that's your job.
Yeah, if you learn oomph,
Yeah.
then that will be at least a big part of your job.
Yeah.
Like looking at Sylvando here, learning oomph way ahead of everyone else.
Sylvando was a king.
Sylvando is a perfect person who has many roles, but among them are definitely casting oomph on all of the attackers.
I think everybody who learns oomph, you're never going to do as much damage with a hit or two with them as your best one's going to do doubling that. So, yeah, it's just a numbers game.
Oh yeah,
That's your role.
Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining us for Retro Encounter 386 Oomph Cast. Ben, Matt alluded to this earlier. Matt decided to talk about something besides Dragon Quest monsters because you brought it up before. But do you want to open up the door and have a bit of a DQM appreciation station?
Actually, I was going to talk about Dragon Quest Builders. If that's
Really?
okay.
All
Yeah.
right.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let us know. Tell us about the bad ending of Dragon Quest 1.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked because Dragon Quest Builders starts based in the world where the hero from Dragon Warrior 1 decided to take the like Dark Lord's bargain, and so it's like a post-apocalyptic version of that world, and you are a hero called the Builder who has the ability to create things, and like humanity has like lost the ability to like build structures and machinery and stuff like that. So it's your job to like round up the wandering people and create like structures and society for them. And it's super fun. It's kind of like I think like a more structured approach to the kind of gameplay you'd see in like Minecraft or something. And I'd always kind of bounced off of those games like Minecraft or other like survival kind of games, just because they're so open ended that I kind of get lost as like what do I want to do. But Dragon Quest Builders, you have quests to complete, and people will ask you to build certain types of rooms or certain types of structures, and by the end you'll have like a whole town built up for them. And it's interesting too because it's divided into chapters, and each chapter is a different area. So once your area is all built up in like the first chapter, you actually move on and you lose all of that, and you go to a new area and you have to start all over again. And that sounds frustrating, but it's actually super fun. You get new recipes to build new types of stuff, and it's just a really good time.
I don't know if Mike Slobato is going to listen to this episode because he hasn't played a ton of Dragon Quest games, but I have given him grief before because I don't think he's ever finished a Dragon Quest game, but other than Builders 1 and 2, which he's put
Oh, wow.
which he's put surprising amount of times into. But Mike is one of those creative types who really does love the freedom to build and like unleash your inner artist or architect in a semi-structured environment. So I'm more intrigued by the fact that Builders 1 follows the bad ending of Dragon Quest 1, and how
Yes.
Builders 2 like sort of introduces you to an ally version of what's his name?
Malroth.
Malroth.
Malroth,
Yeah.
Malroth slash Shido.
He's like a amnesiac version of Malroth.
Right. Yeah, and maybe I think you're maybe maybe Hargon, a villain in the game who's trying to summon Malroth.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Gotcha. It's clear I have not played these, but I'm very interested in the lore implications of them. Because again, I don't really gravitate towards like open-ended building style games, which is also true of Ben, I suppose. But the Dragon Quest nature of this and the story focus of this has me very interested in them. I might get to them eventually if I wasn't podcasting and playing Monster Hunter so much.
The eternal struggle.
But I mean, Wes and Matt, I heard you make some appreciative noises when Ben brought these up. How deep do you guys go into builders?
So when the first one came out, I was like, yeah, I played the demo, got the game, got through chapter 1, and I was like, what? Everything resets for chapter 2? Yeah, something shiny caught my eye. And honestly, I went like almost 2 or 3 years without playing it, very shamefully. And then I won a copy for Vita back when Vita was a thing from someone at Square Enix. And gosh, like right before Builders 2 came out, I'm like, come on, Mason, you got to suck this up and just play it. So, in the course of about 10 days, I put 50 hours into it, blew right through one, rolled right into it like 70 or 80 hours of Builders 2.
When I do
And
that, I call it going full goblin. And oh
I
boy,
did. It was about a month and a half, and about 100 and about 120, 130 hours between the two of them, and I had a blast. Those are definitely, um, like you said, not my cup of tea. The open ended games are not, but like the directed, do this, do this. There were checklists. Man, I can do a checklist, and I can build a mud hut for anybody who wants a mud hut. So you know, it may not have looked pretty if I was not given the specific blueprints. That was great too. Like, here's a blueprint. Like, it's going to be here. Just bring us the items, and then for everything else, just kind of do the bare minimum. And I can do that. I can do that. I love those games though.
Yeah, they're absolutely wonderful, but I've never gone too deep down the rabbit hole. I've played a good number of hours of the first one. But I kind of save them because these are the ultimate gateway drug for my kids to get them
Ah.
to learn about Dragon Quest.
Mhm.
Because Minecraft is absolutely huge for their generation, their age group. And if you can kind of slip a little bit of Dragon Quest in with the Minecraft, just kind of hide it in the
Got
piece of
it.
cheese that is the Minecraft, you can get them pretty far down that lane.
Okay, so get them playing builders for a while, then suddenly accidentally drop your DS copy of Dragon Quest IV next to their breakfast plate. They ask what that is. You tell them, oh, it's just like the building game that you've been playing for 2 weeks, and then suddenly you've indoctrinated them. Perfect.
Well, this is one of the reasons I'm so excited for a new Dragon Quest Monsters, is because now I can prey upon their Pokemon fandom as well. I've got all of these insidious little ways
Oh
to
man.
introduce
Oh,
my kids to Dragon Quest.
hey, let me
Oh
tell you, my oldest, we just had to kick him off the Switch tonight so I could come out here and he could go to bed. And he spent, I think, about 2 hours this evening trying to get a chocolate golem uh, in the demo for that Dragon Quest Monsters 3. His Pokemon and watching me play Dragon Quest has been triggered by this, just by the demo.
Oh, that
And
does my
he's
heart
going
happy.
deeper than I am.
oh boy. What I'm learning from these stories is that parents are diabolical.
Yes,
You use what
100%
you
true.
got, man.
Well, all right. So we had a nice little romp through Dragon Quest spin-offs. I mean, we didn't get to oh boy, Swords for the Wii, the Itadaki Street series where you can have Sephiroth and Dragon Lord play board games together if you really want to. There's a there's a rather delightful Dragon Quest arcade game called Battle Road, which had a sequel called Battle Road Victory that has amazing cutscenes that are worth the YouTube safari. But I would like to move on a little bit because we've talked a lot about the past of Dragon Quest already, but the future of Dragon Quest, or let's say the present and future of Dragon Quest, is very interesting right now because A couple of years ago in May 2021, there was a sort of press conference slash event where they announced 6 Dragon Quest games in one sit down, and with Yuji Horii, the series creator, on hand to talk and hopefully and not accidentally spoil the audience. The interviewer kept asking him to hold back the whole time. It was hilarious.
There was a
Um,
whistle for that.
uh, but they announced 6 games. Dragon Quest Keshi Keshi, which is a puzzle game that is definitely not coming to North America, so we can and definitely not an RPG, so we can throw that aside. An expansion to Dragon Quest X, the Dragon Quest MMO that we also probably will never see, so we're gonna throw that one aside. Then there was Dragon Quest X Offline, which is an offline adaptation of Dragon Quest X. We For a while we were really optimistic about that maybe coming worldwide, but it hasn't happened yet, even though it came out around a year ago in 2022. But putting that one aside again, there's 2 games that are definitely still coming out. The in HD 2D Octopath Traveler visual style remake of Dragon Quest 3, and Dragon Quest 3 is probably the most iconic Dragon Quest game to a certain generation of Japanese fans. So it made sense that would be one to get that treatment. And then they gave us a logo and title of Dragon Quest 12, the Flames of Fate. And but those are still upcoming. Yuji Horii even mentioned at TGS a little while ago that development on those 2 games is progressing smoothly, which is his way of saying don't ask me about them. Uh,
Yeah.
but that's 5 games I've mentioned. The last one was Dragon Quest Treasures, and we didn't mention that in our little spin-off segment. It came out last year. There's a review for it on both RPG Fan and RP Gamer, and Matt, when you and I talked earlier this year, Treasures was not your favorite Dragon Quest spinoff you've ever played, and you were worried that Treasures would be like replacing Monsters or some of the other Dragon Quest spinoffs. Tell us a little bit about what Dragon Quest Treasures is like, and how you maybe felt trepidation afterwards.
So Treasures is made for Dragon Quest fans. It's not really made for anybody else because the gameplay loot is you're the little Eric or Mia. Actually, you're both of them from Dragon Quest 11, and you get sucked into this alternate world, and suddenly you're picked up by pirates, and you're tasked with befriending monsters and
Pirates, you don't say.
oh yeah, that comes all back to pirates, right? And you got to get your pirate squad and beat the other pirate squads to dig up all this treasure. Like just treasures are out there all the time. And you go out there and you dig up treasures with your monsters behind you. You don't really control them. You just set the AI. You're running around with a little gosh, it's got the British name. The British call it a catapult. Um, the rest of us would just call it a slingshot. I do remember early on hearing about catapults. I'm like, how do you carry a catapult around with you? But they went UK version totally there. So you're taking little pot shots at stuff, and your monsters are mainly doing the battles around you. So it started development as a Dragon Quest Monsters game, but then took a hard right somewhere even before COVID. Um, January 2020, they said that there was development problems with that, and get back to us in a year. And a year went by, and we found out it's its own thing. But the treasures you dig up are little moments and characters and monsters and stuff from all the games, even the spin-offs. There was a card battler game out there, Dragon Quest Rivals, that's even shuttered in Japan. Like nothing shutters in Japan to Dragon Quest, but this one's even shuttered in Japan. And some of the treasures would be you'd pick up a card from that game. And like the description would be like, seems like a card that you'd play in a game from a land far away. um, You'd find the wall that Alina kicked down in Dragon Quest IV. So
One
I
of my
mean,
first treasures, and I was so happy.
yep. So you'd find like the damage tile from Dragon Quest One or something, and so it's got all these characters, all these monsters. There's a lot of great stuff, but I mean, if that's your first Dragon Quest encounter, you'd be like, "What is this? What's a broken wall? What's this? What's that?" Um, for longtime fans, you get some enjoyment out of it. But the whole time I'm playing, I'm like, this is a small roster of monsters. I think there was like 12 unique monster designs, and each one got recolored about 5 or 6 times, and it just was so repetitive and like, okay, you're dungeon diving, you're going out. It was a great overworld, different overworlds. I had a lot of fun exploring, but kind of when it was done, it was done. I was like, I have no, and it was all random. So, I have, like, I'm not going to get all 777 treasures. Like, I could waste a good 100 hours on this, and it's just going to come down to RNG. So, and then also, all these games that we talked about, gosh, there's been like 6, 7 monsters games, 2 heroes, 3 Mori games, 2 builders. Um, that Itadaki Street's got stuff all the way through the Vita and the PS4, and I'm just thinking like they can't do another Treasures game. Like, what would be another Treasures game? Dig up the same 777 treasures? So it's kind of like this already feels like a one-off dead end kind of thing. Where do we go? Like, all we really know is we're getting a remake of 3, and yeah, 12's out there, but like where's the side content coming from? Because there's way more side games than there are mainline in Dragon Quest. And while the mainline's awesome, you're going to be playing 2 or 3 side quests or side games for every mainline. But where's it going? Like, Treasure seems like a dead end. Everything else seems like it's gone. Like, beginning of the year was like, man, what's happening with Dragon Quest?
And we have an answer for that, and which had
Yes.
which had our tones change about our outlook on the series. But I'm going to save that for a little later. Wes, I could hear you squirming during parts of Matt's soliloquy over there. What are your feelings on Dragon Quest Treasures?
I'm the defense force, I guess, for Dragon Quest Treasures, because exactly that kind of for the fans atmosphere is something that I loved, and we gotten so many things announced in 2021 that I wasn't impatient for them to announce anymore. I knew that they eventually would have more things come out. I had absolute faith that we'd see monsters come back, and hey, we did. So I didn't view this as some kind of off ramp that was going to be, some kind of end for the Dragon Quest series. I just saw it as an extra diversion. And for that, for like the fandom, it's absolutely a treat to see all of those little treasures pop up. And
Mhm.
it falls into, I kind of have games fall into one of two categories. One is like an engagement game where I'm fully engaged the whole time. I'm jiving with the story. I am, absolutely 100% focused on that game while I'm playing it. And the other is a podcast game. And Dragon Quest Treasures is the definition of a podcast game.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
True.
yes. Agreed. 100%.
I listened to like most of the Magnus archives while while playing Dragon Quest Treasures, and it was the absolute perfect way to experience that because during those parts that do kind of drag, do kind of get repetitive, you can kind of turn your mind off, and this becomes almost like a fidget toy for you. Like Dragon Quest Treasures, much like the Muso games often turn into, can be kind of fidget toys for people like me with ADHD who just need something to do with their hands while they're doing something else. I know that's kind of damning with faint praise, but I genuinely think that this was a cool way to take something like the Monsters formula and do something different with it. I think you're
Mhm.
absolutely right that what the heck would be a sequel to Dragon Quest Treasures?
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. But I think as a little one-off, as something to experience, even if you don't finish it, even if the story's not exactly super engaging, but as just a video game as a toy almost. It
Mhm.
absolutely struck me as something wonderful for Dragon Quest fans.
I mean, you want to talk about Dragon Quest podcast games? I think my phone shut down from overheating twice because of playing Dragon Quest Tact while listening to
Yes.
podcasts
Yes.
on the same machine. Again, do not consider that an endorsement for Dragon Quest Tact. Quite the contrary.
I
But
came in at the tail end of your toxic relationship with that game, and that's like
oh
the
boy.
lens through which I view Dragon Quest Tact now.
Like I was probably looking like I had multiple personalities on Twitter. I would be super excited about who was coming in the next banner, and then despairing about I just spent 6 hours watching The Mentalist and playing Dragon Quest Tact, and I don't know and I don't know who I am anymore. Yeah, that was a very 2021 mood. But anyway,
Yeah.
I have not played Dragon Quest Treasures. I did buy it. I found it on sale earlier this year. Um, and then, so I spent, I don't know, like $22 on it, which seems reasonable. But when I'm looking for a Dragon Quest distraction, because I don't think 12 is coming out until 2025 at the earliest.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, Um, it is something I probably would enjoy visiting. But Ben, I think before we recorded, you mentioned that you had played Treasures as well.
Yeah, I did play Treasures, and I'm kind of with Matt on this one. I think it kind of has a little bit like there's a little bit of monsters in there because you recruit the monsters even if you don't have like total direct control over them. Has a little bit of builders because you do have like a big open environment that you can explore around, and there's some like movement options and stuff like that. But it just doesn't like lead to anything. Like in builders, like you explore around and you get resources so that you can then create structures and build things. And in monsters, you feel like, oh, I'm developing and building this monster to be stronger and better and stuff. And it's just kind of like, there's not really a whole lot of what comes after that. Like you bring in the monsters and then, they follow you around and you can direct them to attack or run away. And like, that's the extent of it. So it's very cute. I love Eric. He's my favorite character from Dragon Quest XI. So to get a game with him as a kid and see him and his sister interact and stuff like that part of it is all really fun and cute. But there's just not a lot of meat on the bones of Treasures for me.
I
So
mean, it sounds like there's at least 777 pieces of meat on the bone there. But
Yeah.
I mean, if the game
Those are more
is
crumbs.
yeah, well,
yes, exactly.
if the game is basically a loot grind of token cameos, to get the synapses firing in your nostalgic part of your brain, then I think that like it succeeds at doing that, but maybe it isn't exactly what people wanted. And it doesn't have the rich lore of like helping a amnesiac Malroth or anything. And a lot of the Dragon Quest games um do revisit the past or spin off from a specific character. I mean, the first Dragon Quest Monsters game is about Terry and Millie from Dragon Quest 6. A bunch of the Monsters games are similar. The GBA one we didn't get is about Kieran from Dragon Quest 7. And The first mystery dungeon game was Tornico Talon. One of the later mystery dungeon games was a young Yangus from Dragon Quest 8. They do this a lot, but recently, uh, I think it was during the Summer Games Festival series of presentations, the Nintendo Direct around that time, in fact. They announced a new Dragon Quest game that would come in less than 6 months. It hasn't come out yet, but I know all four of us are very excited about it. Where they did maybe, I think, the most exciting choice they could have possibly made for a Dragon Quest game centered on a specific character and set in the distant past. Because the new Dragon Quest Monsters game, The Dark Prince, is about Pissarro from Dragon Quest IV, one of the most iconic characters in the series, and almost certainly my favorite Dragon Quest villain.
Now I'm squirming for a different reason.
I,
This
it
is
is
just excitement
it,
squirming now.
it is so cool. I think now the demo is out, and I know that Matt, you've played the demo.
Mhm.
Maybe you and Ben and Wes both have as well. But I just
Mhm.
Yeah.
I oh okay
Yeah, I
okay
have.
okay got
Yep.
it. But I think it's being framed that we know of Bizarro of Dragon Quest IV as being like the champion of the whole monster community, and this undefeatable warrior. But this is sort of the like but how did he get there of that story, of that status, um which is such a fun framing device. I can't wait to play the game myself. But I guess let's start with you, Wes. How excited were you to hear this news, and how did you find the demo?
I think I screamed a little uh, when I saw this coming out, and I saw part of my favorite Dragon Quest 4, and this seems to be like the strongest connection to the plot of a previous game that we've seen in some ways. Potentially telling like an actual vital part of the Dragon Quest 4 story that's just kind of been background up until now. Um, and the demo didn't let me down. It's not a mainline Dragon Quest game, and I've seen complaints because it doesn't have the production value of a mainline Dragon Quest game by any means. It looks closer to
No.
Treasures in performance and in visual fidelity. But the way that the game plays brings back everything I love about the Monsters series. I was almost going into a Muso rant again, and I don't know. It's hard not to be excited when it has a plot that might be this tied into the actual story of the main game. This makes the Dragon Quest nerd in me just utterly excited and over the moon, and the demo only amplified that.
I think I documented this in our RPG fan Slack chat and maybe also on other social media. I even said, "Oh, hey, look, that guy kind of looks like Pizarro." And then,
Yes.
and then there was a pause, and I'm like, "Wait, oh, wait, hold on, wait!" And then it was just a lot of all capital letters, and then 4 or 5 people in the chat, and with Wes and I among them, just going bananas after we realized what was going on. Again, like because Pizarro was so cool, and and sort of what how they're framing it makes sense within Pizarro's journey, and this feels like a meaningful prequel to Dragon Quest IV. Because I mean, we see Rose, and I think and I think, oh, what's the name of the evil priest? You know who I'm talking
Was it
about.
Amon?
Oh yeah, Amon. That's it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Rose and Amon are present as well, and those are important
Hmm.
characters for the Dragon Quest IV endgame. It there will definitely be more cameos in the full game. It is such a cool choice. This is going to be the first time I've gone deep into a Dragon Quest Monsters game since the Game Boy Color, I think.
Hey, we just got a new trailer that came out the day of this recording, and Estark plays a big part right at the beginning.
Oh my goodness.
Awesome. This does not diminish my excitement one iota.
Oh no, that should not.
But I mean, all three of you have played the demo. Ben or Matt,
Mhm.
whoever wants to go first. How have you enjoyed it?
Yeah, I mean the demo is really great. It really feels like classic Dragon Quest monsters. The demo is actually really big. You've got like 2 full areas to like explore and recruit monsters in. And there's also a fair bit of story. But I did find the way that the connections to Dragon Quest IV implemented is like a little weird. Like because it's a Dragon Quest Monsters game, like the tone is pretty light. But then you deal with like some pretty serious subject matter with Rose, and it just feels kind of odd. And I don't know if that's just because the demo's like leaving things out, or if that's just like how the game is. But I did find that kind of jarring because like Rose is like a slave, and they're like using her to like she when she cries, like she produces like rubies or emeralds from her tears, and so they're like making her cry or hitting her, stuff like that. And Sorrow does save her, but it's just like a really I don't know, the tone is really weird. I don't know if anybody else has played the demo felt like that, but it just was kind of odd to me in that way.
It was a very small scene for such a big, like,
Yeah,
the whole plot of Dragon Quest IV
yeah,
revolves around that. He's furious with humans, and that's why he needs the secret of evolution, and
right, right.
like that sets up everything. And yeah, in this demo, like I don't think the demo starts at the start of the game. I think we're a couple cutscenes into it where the demo turns on, because you just kind of pop up in that town and,
Hmm.
oh, you're awake. Um, and just from the very first trailer, it showed that, he tried to, I think, hit the priest, and the priest cursed him to, well, you can't damage any monsters now. Ha ha ha. But, and I want to say someone in the beginning of the demo even says, like, hey, remember, you can't harm a monster. So here,
Yes.
take this
Yeah,
guy.
that does come up. Yeah.
Yep. And then, yeah, that whole scene with Rose is just like, oh, you showed up because you're trying to win this tournament. Oh, by the way, hey, look at this girl over here getting like punched in the gut or whatever. Like they don't show anything, like, thank goodness, but they're like, oh, it's your turn to beat her to get the ruby tears.
Ugh.
And then she's just like, oh, you take her away, and she's like, I'll just stay here in my room.
Yeah,
That's fine.
it's weird. Like he saves her, but it's like he doesn't even really care that much,
Yeah,
and then she just
he
like tags along. It's so odd.
yeah, she's just following along, and then you go to the Nadiria, and she's like, oh, there's no humans here, so I can be along with you. I'll just run alongside. You handle the monsters. It's fine. So yeah, it's got it's a little maybe too light, you know?
It's like anticlimactic
Mhm.
for what the like actual origins of this storyline are, or at least what you hear in Dragon Quest IV, to then see this and you're like, this is not how I imagined it happened at
And
all.
and I wonder how it's gonna go, because we know the story of Dragon Quest IV. We know where this is headed.
Yes.
Like, It's not a good place for either of them.
Yeah.
So
Until the epilogue of the DS version, but
correct, yeah, and
yeah, this is
unless we're
this
getting
is
to
a
chapter 6.
yeah. This is a sad story that is, and it's setting up for tragedy, and a lot of players
Mhm.
will probably know how Dragon Quest IV goes. But yeah, I guess this isn't quite as narratively rich as I was hoping. But it at least, I mean, I can hardly imagine a more fun vehicle for getting into a Dragon Quest Monsters story. I will eventually play this. I just don't know when because there's too many video games, and
Mhm.
I think this comes out about a month before like a Dragon Infinite Wealth does. So good luck. But this isn't the only Dragon Quest game coming out later this year. There is a adaptation of The Legend of Dai called Infinity Strash Dragon Quest: The Legend of Dai. Um, I mean, Dino Daiboken or Dai's Adventure or Legend of Dai was an early '90s manga and anime written by Riku Sanjo, who much more importantly went on to write a couple Kamen Rider shows. Uh, uh,
This is the more important
yeah,
That
piece
that
of trivia.
yeah,
I mean,
that's the most
as a
important
Dragon
part.
Quest fan and not that, I still think you might be right.
I mean, it was it's a pretty good manga. I mean, I read a fan translation of it many years ago.
Ditto, yeah.
I think it sold over 30 million copies. I think it's in like the top 60 or 70s best selling manga of all
Yeah, it's pretty
time.
successful.
It
Mhm.
was a successful manga that sort of started out as a semi adaptation of Dragon Quest 3, and then it started doing its own thing. Ori Chalcom chess pieces are the best villains. I will take no advisement on that. Um, but yeah, it's getting an adaptation that's coming out worldwide, and I think it looks like at least a partial adaptation of the main story. So we'll see Dai and Pop and Marm and Hyunkel and all those jokers. Crocodile and the Pink Crocodile Warrior, lest I forget.
Yep. Oh, this is definitely it covers the anime, the new modern anime, which was 100 episodes. It covers up through episode 41, so it's going to follow right along and end with one of the story arcs.
So they probably won't get to Varn, but we'll at least get to some Hadlar stuff, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Hadler pops up on the island right at the beginning of the
That's true, but he's sort of the main villain of the first
correct.
couple arcs of the game, and
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
and Varn is the back half of the series villain.
Hmm.
Um, well, I mean that's cool. I haven't seen the anime, but because I haven't watched a ton of anime the last several years. But the but I know the story and characters in that series. It's kind of a normal shonen adventure anime, or but a good version of that. So, I'm definitely not communicating excitement here, just because I'm way more interested in the Dark Prince and whatever Dragon Quest 12 ends up being. But Infinity Strash and Dark Prince are the sort of present and future of Dragon Quest, and somewhere far in the distance, there's the HD2D remake of 3 and the real deal, the Flames of Fate, coming eventually. Um, this has been a mostly positively toned episode, but how do we feel about the future of Dragon Quest? I mean, I'm sure all of us will be racing to the head of the line when Dragon Quest 12 comes out, but how optimistic are you about the future of Dragon Quest, or pessimistic?
Like I said, I started the year kind of pessimistic. I'm like, all right, Dragon Quest Monsters is gone. They haven't had a new one in Japan in 7 years. We haven't gotten one here since Joker 2. They had all these 3DS titles and remakes, and we got nothing. So like, well, Dragon Quest Monsters is really dead and gone out west. We just get treasures. We get the spin off of the spin off. So that was kind of like, oh man, and where's Dragon Quest 3? I mean, they had some great footage to show us 2 years ago, and we haven't heard from that. Although I got a conspiracy theory on that one involving Final Fantasy. And I don't know, like getting two games here. Like, when do you get two Dragon Quest games? And the Adventure Die or the Legend of Die game, Infinity Strash, is the first console Dragon Quest game or spin-off that all right, I guess actually wasn't Treasures was too. Like we're getting all these day and date with the Japanese.
Which
And I
is
mean, we got a Monsters game
such a
with
good change.
voice acting in
Yeah,
it.
that's
Oh
crazy.
yeah.
There was over a year between the Japanese and English versions of Dragon Quest 11.
Yeah. And now we're getting Infinity Strash. or I think Treasures came out something like December 8th. So if you look at Treasures, Infinity Strash, and the Dark Prince on December 1st this year, we're getting 3 games in less than 365 days. The exact day they're dropping in Japan. So like, wow. I don't think that's sustainable for very long. I think it's the COVID catch up now. But I fully expect Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D next year. And then like you said, probably 2025 is Dragon Quest 12. And somewhere in there, hopefully we find out about where they're going with some other side entries. It, I kind of don't expect them to go back to those other ones, but like we get a card game or something.
Rocket Slime Trilogy.
I will take the remakes. Hey, give me that in 2025 too. Dragon Quest 3 at the beginning of 24, maybe remake at the end, and 12 somewhere in the middle of 25.
Well, for me, I'm worried I'm slightly burned out on Dragon Quest only because that Tact commanded so much of my attention for 18 months. But
That's your own fault, man.
no, it's completely self-inflicted. Just like watching 5 seasons of The Mentalist. But basically, when a Dragon Quest game that interests me comes up, I will show up. I know I probably won't play any Dragon Quest game other than maybe the Dark Prince over the next, say, year. But when the 3 remake happens, I will be right there. When 12 happens, I will be right there. I heartily enjoy every Dragon Quest game that I sort of focus on and put time into, and I will. And even if I don't play a Dragon Quest for the next several months, to or a year or more, I will be completely pumped when those happens because they are exactly the kind of RPG I want when I'm in the right mindset for it. So I'm not as concerned about the state of Dragon Quest spin-offs as you were, Matt, earlier this year, because
Hmm.
I knew that 3 HD 2D and 12 were eventually coming, and I had all the faith in the world in those. But Wes, I mean, we know you're excited for the Dark Prince, but what's your take on the temperature of Dragon Quest right now?
I'm a very patient person. So I never had that like worry. Um, they can take as long as they want with those games, and I'll still be there waiting on day one when they come out. Ultimately, I'm just kind of excited about so much of the stuff that they've shown. I'm still keeping the faith that we're going to get Dragon Quest X offline eventually, which is something that deeply, deeply interests me. I'm very excited about the prospect of getting to experience those stories without having to do any weird translation shenanigans to play on a Japanese server. Um, and Dragon Quest 3 remake looks amazing. That's a game that in the West has historically not gotten as much love as it has in Japan, and I think this would be a great opportunity for it to bump up a little bit. Honestly, if I'm nervous about anything, it's Dragon Quest 12, and that's just because of the buzzwords around it being more mature or darker or whatnot. But even then, um, I have some faith that Dragon Quest is not going to go so far down that road that we're talking like FF16 levels of drama or anything. I don't think that Dragon Quest is going to go that far down that pit, and that's fine for Final
Well,
Fantasy.
Final Fantasy
That's
16 literally involved a lot of flames and fate. So, I mean,
fair.
Do these teams talk to each other at all? Like, come on, Square. Gotta have a conference every once in a while.
Yeah, I sometimes get a little bit worried when someone says they're going to make their story more mature because that can also be a shorthand for a lot of kind of immature concepts. um, but it's Dragon Quest. I mean, I've always loved it. It's a new Dragon Quest comes out and I'm there. Uh, I don't have any doubt that they've got a strong future with all the stuff that they have announced, even if it takes a little bit longer than maybe we'd hoped.
Yeah, I think I'm most looking forward to just to see what Dragon Quest 12 is gonna bring. They've mentioned multiple times about like wanting to take it in a new direction or be more mature, as Wes said. And I have faith in Yuji Horii. He's not let me down yet with the storytelling in Dragon Quest. So I think the series is in good hands. I think it benefits from having that strong overseeing direction, compared to Final Fantasy, where Final Fantasy can kind of seem all over the place from entry to entry. So, but I'm just really curious, like what their idea of bringing Dragon Quest into the modern age like really means, because it could mean a lot of different things. And even though Dragon Quest doesn't like really appear super, it's not the first thing you think of when you think of mature storytelling. A lot of the prior mainline games really do have a lot of like in-depth and emotional moments. I mean, we're talking about like Sorrow's storyline in 4, or some of the vignettes in Dragon Quest 7 are just really heart-wrenching and
Mm.
emotional. So, I trust them to deliver something really good.
Every Dragon Quest game has a point it's making. With 4, they wanted to go into the stories of characters besides the hero. 5 was a game about family and fatherhood. 6 was a game about dreams. 11 was a game about about nostalgia and re-examining your past, and is it okay to leave one past for a different future. Like, there's always a very specific story focus and concept behind all of Yuji Horí's writing that that makes the whole of the game better than the sum of its parts, in my opinion. And I know that when Dragon Quest 3 and 12 happen, we'll see it in action. And even though I like some Dragon Quest games more than others, I will always be excited to play one. And so in general, my feeling on Dragon Quest is optimistic. It's like I love this series, and I'm gonna play these games, and they're finally releasing some again. And like you, Wes, I'm hopeful that we'll get that 10 offline, but I don't know. My hope is dwindling with each month. We'll see how I feel next year.
I'll
But
keep the optimism up. You don't have to.
all right. If I need
See,
if I need a top up, I'll message you. It's like Wes, I'm feeling a little depressed. Let's talk about Pissarro for a few minutes.
we talked about the slime collection coming together. Maybe
Yes.
we just put that aside and give us 10 offline. Like that's a fine
I'd take
compromise.
that.
I could live with that.
Yeah.
I'll do that creepy Facebook relationship status and take whatever I can get.
Mm. Woo!
But listeners, thank you for putting up with us with whatever we got. We spent well over an hour celebrating and prognosticating Dragon Quest, and I'm finally glad I got my Dragon Quest fix this year, because I am not going back to Dragon Quest Tact. But also, thank you so much, Ben, Wes, and Matt, for joining me today. Especially you, Matt, making your first appearance on Retro Encounter after we've been talking about it for close-ish to a year.
Mhm.
And yeah, listeners, please check out Matt's stuff. Dragon Quest Slime Time is a delightful Dragon Quest focused podcast that takes people from is it mostly the Dragon's Den community where a lot of your guests come from?
It is, although I would say after about a year, we suddenly just started getting really talking to a lot of fan translators and a lot of people in the streaming community. So uh, I don't think we've really had like a fan interview in quite a while, but somebody new joined our Dragon's Den Discord recently and came in with all this monsters like knowledge and content. And he built a tool online for breeding stuff. And I'm like, oh my
Ooh.
gosh, I was just chatting with him today. Like, we got to have you on just to talk about the monster series. And then we'll have you on again when we have some Dragon Quest, the new ones in December. So yeah, it mainly, it started as an outreach of the Dragon Quest Dragon's Den website that's been going for 25 years and our forums, and then it has really spread. And you know what, it was a lot of the tact and the online phone games that really kind of got us pushed to Discord, and so people could do some real live playing with Dragon Quest of the Stars, and that's kind of brought in a whole new group of people that we've enjoyed chatting with. And we've got a bunch of us in the mid 40s, and yet now we've got some people in their 20s again, like, hey, like new fans, like, come talk to us.
Well, that's excellent. I haven't listened to every single episode of Slime Time, but I've listened to a great many of them, and you guys do great work, and your enthusiasm for the series really shines through every time.
Well, thank you.
It's an excellent listen. But it's also an excellent listen. RPG fans, other suite of podcasts. In addition to Retro Encounter, we have Random Encounter every 2 weeks about randomness, and Rhythm Encounter every 2 weeks about RPG music and rhythmness. But going back to Retro Encounter, the podcast you're listening to right now, we have most of October planned out. We're doing 2 episodes on Rhapsody, a musical adventure, a somewhat lighthearted, easy, goes down easy RPG that should be a stark change from me suffering through Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter over the last couple of weeks. Just a slightly change in vibe between those 2 games. But also, we're in the early stages of planning an October, end of October Halloween episode. I don't know exactly what it'll be about, but it'll be a little creepy, kooky, and or ooky. And November's podcasts, we're starting to plan them out. I know we haven't finished picking a game for November yet. We'll know in a couple of days, but it'll be from either Bandai Namco, Nihon Falcom, BioWare, or From Software is going to be the November game. Is one of those 4. So please look forward to that. If you want to ask us about our upcoming games, or Rhapsody, or Breath of Fire, or Dragon Quest, or Dairy Queen, you can always email retro@rpgfan.com. I check that every couple of days. And if you want to interact with RPG Fan elsewhere, you can go to the website rpgfan.com and leave a comment on an article, or find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, YouTube, Threads, probably Blue Sky. Scott is streaming something on Twitch, I think 5 nights a week. There's a lot of places to find RPG Fan, and it's always called either RPG Fan or RPG Fan.com. There's also the RPG Fan shop where you can get RPG Fan merch, rpgfan.com/shop. The merch includes apparel, coffee mugs, phone cases, I think keychains, a lot of stuff to check out on the RPG Fan shop. And my favorite way for you to interact with us is to leave us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or Spotify, or however you're listening, especially if it's those 5 stars. But if you want to reach us as individual panelists and not as a podcast or as a website, let's tell them, the listeners, how to find us, the panelists, starting with you, Wes.
You can find me on Twitter @WesIliff, and on Blue Sky. I have no idea how to express a username for Blue Sky in words.
Oh, I would just do like username then .bisky.
It's Lone Weasel dot whatever else goes on to whatever else goes onto a Blue Sky name on Blue Sky.
All right, Ben, how can listeners find you?
Yeah, they can email me at benloganlove@gmail.com.
And now our special guest, Matt, how can listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter, or actually just very recently on Blue Sky, @Platium3.
And listeners, I change my name on every different platform because I make poor decisions like that. You can find me most easily on Twitter. I'm @TheRealMonsoon. On Blue Sky, I am sollosi.bisky.social. And on Instagram, I am evoker4dogs. And on RPG Fans Discord, I am Monsoon Mike. That was just a chain combo of bad social media decisions in a row. But it was not a series of bad decisions organizing and executing on this podcast. I had a great time. I hope you had a great time. Thank you, good night, and good luck.